Welcome everyone. My name is Andres Orjuela and I'm a chef, and my passion is health and nutrition. So I am very interested in the role that food plays in our health. The topic that we have for today is something that I think a lot of us struggle with, and it's finding balance in our love affair with sugar. And a love affair is a two-way deal. We love sugar, but we're going to find out also sugar loves us. And so what exactly that's all about. So first we're going to be understanding our love for sugar, and it's something that's built into our bodies. It's in our DNA, and of course we fight it all the time, but I think if we understand it and can accept that part of us, it's going to make that struggle easier. So our bodies rely on glucose, which is the term for blood sugar. So in our blood, there is sugar that goes around with all of the blood cells, and that is taken to all of the cells in our bodies, muscle cells and all of the cells, so that they can create energy. Every cell in our body and our brain, all of our organs, our arms and legs, they use glucose for energy. So if I want to move my arm, for that motion, for that movement, my cells are using glucose. But also to reproduce and to fix themselves. So glucose is essential for all of our body functions. And so we need to get glucose from our environment. Fortunately, our body is very adaptive, and it can make glucose from carbohydrates, from fats, and from protein. So all three of those, our bodies can take that and break it down and process it and create glucose. That is how important glucose is for our system, that it can process any of these three macronutrients, basically any type of food, and it can turn it into glucose. However, of all those three, carbohydrates, proteins, and fats, our bodies prefer carbs. And it's because it requires the least amount of work for our bodies to turn a carbohydrate into glucose. Basically, a carbohydrate is just a long chain of sugars, all tied together. So a carb, if you take potatoes or rice, any type of carb, it's made up of just sugar, but it's tied up in long chains. And on top of that, it's got fiber all around it. So when you eat a potato, in order for the body to get this glucose, first it needs to pull out the carbs from the fiber, which slows down the process. It takes some time. Then the body has to take in these long chains and slowly break them down so that each individual sugar is on its own, and that can then be processed into glucose, which then enters our blood. So there is a process even for carbs, but for proteins and fats, it's an even longer process. So our body prefers carbs. That's its first choice for energy. And if somebody is going to run a race, they always say just eat a lot of pasta. Why pasta? Because pasta is just carbs. It's just concentrated energy that our body can break down and use to run a long race. However, of these carbs, the one that most quickly enters our bloodstream is sugar. And that is because sugar is not in chains anymore. In the process of making sugar, they've broken it down, and just the white crystal sugar that we put into our coffee, if we take a teaspoon of that, in about 5 minutes, that energy is in our blood. So that's how quick it can be. And our body likes that. It likes to not have to work. It likes to have quick energy so that we can continue living. And so it's learned to reward us. When we find sugar, and we eat it, our body is trained to release a hormone called dopamine. And this hormone makes us happy. And so our body is giving us a positive response every time we eat sugar, because our bodies need a lot of sugar. So, way back then, before we had supermarkets, if you were in the forest and you saw a bush of berries, bright red, first the color attracts you, and then you eat it and it tastes sweet. It's got fructose and sucrose, which can both be turned into glucose. And so your body likes that. Immediately your brain releases dopamine, you get happy, and so you eat more because you're happy. So that is really the basis of our love for sugar. It's built into our system. Our bodies, over many years, many generations, has learned to reward us for getting sugar. So that's why we love sugar, because it makes us happy. But there is a dark side to this type of love. And you can see that not just in love to a sugar, but any kind of relationship. If you love something so much that it takes over your life, that you can't stop thinking about it, that you become just obsessed, that's not always necessarily healthy. This explains that dark side of our love for sugar. Sugar is actually 8 times more addictive than cocaine. And we talk, so dangerously about cocaine. Don't let our kids get a hold of cocaine, because they're going to be addicted and it's going to ruin their lives. That is how seriously we should talk about sugar. 8 times more. Sugar is 8 times more addictive than cocaine. And I don't know what your experiences are, but I've had some people in my life who have been addicted to cocaine. And they have to fight and fight and fight to let go of that addiction. Of course, fighting our addiction to sugar is not simple. It's more complicated than somebody letting go of their addiction to cocaine. The other thing too is a person can live without cocaine, but we have to eat. So it's not only that we can not have sugar, we have to have some kind of relationship to food if we are to survive. So that also adds complexity to it. But there's been a lot of studies. There was a very interesting ABC presentation about sugar and its addiction. So if you want to look that up eventually, it's interesting information. So now that we've understood our love for sugar, and that it's built into us, and that it's serious, and that it's addictive, so there is a dark side to this love for sugar, let's understand sugar's love for us. Now, sugar is an interesting thing because we find it in nature, and it has many different forms, and we'll talk about this in a further lecture. Sugar is sometimes referred to as energy, is referred to as carbs, is referred to as sugar or sucrose or fructose or glucose. So there's a lot of different names to sugar. But the sugar that we eat, the processed white sugar, came about in the early 1800s. So we've had it for about 200 plus years. And then further, in 1968, I think, in Japan, they invented something called high fructose corn syrup, which is also based on sugar. It's actually based on fructose, which is a type of sugar, and it's in liquid form, and it's sweeter than sugar. So if the sweetness of sugar was 1, high fructose corn syrup is 1.7. So it's even sweeter than sugar. It's even more addictive. We desire it more. And so now, it's the thing about high fructose corn syrup, it's very, very cheap to produce. So where we used to use sugar to put into baked goods and breads and all kinds of things, chocolate, now we're using high fructose corn syrup because it's cheaper. But it's actually possibly more dangerous because it's even sweeter. So let's understand sugar's love for us. And to really understand that, we have to understand something called the bliss point. Now, the food industry is out to make money. That's their goal. It's not to keep us healthy, it's not to feed us, it's just to make money, like any other industry. The car industry, as a byproduct, provides us good cars, safe cars, but their goal is to make money. It's the same with the food industry. The byproduct of the food industry is that we can enjoy food that's grown in Japan and Chile and have, strawberries out of season. Those are byproducts, but the goal of the food industry is to make money. We need to know that. So something that they use very, very scientifically is something called the bliss point. And that is, if I manufacture a food, now this applies only to manufactured foods, processed foods, because an apple and a strawberry, it is what it is. It grows from the earth, unless we're speaking about genetically modified, and we're starting to also enter that realm where, some vegetables, some fruits are being produced. But here I'm talking specifically about manufactured foods, processed foods. When they create, for example, a cookie or bread, they do studies where they sit people down and they made a bread with 1 teaspoon of sugar, and then another bread with 1.5 teaspoons of sugar, and another one with 2 teaspoons of sugar, and another one with 2.5 teaspoons of sugar. And they sit people down, they say, okay, we want you to try this bread, and rate it, tell us what you like about it. And so people say, oh, I like the caramelized color on the outside, it's very soft, I can taste a little bit of sweetness, it's nice, it feels fresh. Okay, great. Now taste this other bread. And they'll taste it and they'll go, I like it more. I don't know what it is, but it's yummier. It's like the flavor pops out. Okay, great. They take notes. How about this bread? And so they'll eat it and they'll say, this one's even yummier. There's something about it. I don't know what it is, but it's really, really good. And they'll take another one and they'll say, this one's too sweet. I don't like it. It's too sweet. It's nice, but it's too sweet. And so they know they found their bliss point. It wasn't bread number 1. It wasn't bread number 2. Bread number 3, which they liked best. And then they went overboard. Bread number 4, they thought the person said, no, it's too sweet. So they do studies where they're trying to find this bliss point, the highest amount of sugar that they can have in a product, where the person is going to like it best, where we are going to be most addicted to this product. So when they are making Cheerios, they're not sitting there thinking, let's make a healthy meal, a breakfast meal for children. That's not their goal. Their goal is, how can we design this product to sell the most? We want everybody, children, adults, teenagers, college students, old people, we want everybody to love Cheerios, to be addicted to it, so that they want to have this every single morning. That is their goal. And so this bliss point is interesting and important to recognize. Manufactured products, foods that have been made in a factory, are scientifically studied to make us addicted. They want us to buy more of it. They're not interested in us being healthy. They're interested in us buying. So, we have come to a point where 80% of the food in America has added sugar. 80%. So if I walk into a supermarket with my eyes closed, and I just feel around and reach for something and put it in my mouth, and just do that randomly, 80% of the time, I'm going to be eating something with added sugar. I'm going to be eating a product that has been manufactured by a company that is designed to make me addicted to sugar, that is not necessarily interested in my health. 80% of the time. That's, I think, terrible that we have come to the point where our landscape, food landscape, the majority of it is possibly bad for us. So that is sugar's love for us. It stems from industrialized food, where they are producing food not for our health, but for our money. Sugar is put into our foods so that we are drawn to it. So that's the side of the sugar love affair. So what does that mean? That means that we have to make a special effort to eat mostly that other 20%. It's very, very hard to avoid completely eating things with added sugar. You know, if you go over to somebody's house and they've made this delicious meal, you know, it's maybe unpolite to ask, well, you know, did you cook this at home or did you buy it pre-made? You know, is it... So sometimes you have to just eat it, and it's okay. It's not about extremes. We can have a little bit of sugar here and there, and it's not going to kill us. But if we're constantly eating these processed foods with added sugars, then we're eating way too much sugar. We need to make a very, very special effort and focus on this 20% that is natural foods. And I'm talking about apples and bananas and oranges and broccoli and kale and rhubarb and whatever else comes from the earth, potatoes, rice, you know, those things that are natural. That's the 20%. There's a very interesting TED Talk by a lady called Laura Marquise, and she was addicted to sugar for a long time. She was very, very overweight for many years in her life, and she struggled with sugar. She would binge eat. She would get a gallon of ice cream and sit there and eat it all, and she couldn't control herself. And she thought, it's just me, I lack willpower. There's something wrong with me. And then she understood that sugar is addictive, and that these companies, they're manipulating the food culture so that we are drawn to eat unnecessarily. Not only do they spend thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars in research, they spend millions on top of that in advertising. They want us to buy their products. So in any case, she says real food is our medicine, and that's that 20% that we're talking about. And fake food is our poison. So if you're interested, definitely look her up. Her TED Talk is about 20 minutes, very, very interesting. She tells about her experience and how she's now transformed her diet, and she's committed to living a healthy lifestyle, and gives talks to help other people as well. So really interesting. And I think what she says is very, very to the point. A little bit extreme, people might say, poison? Food is poison? Sugar is poison? Well, to be very, very precise, no substance is intrinsically harmful or harmless. It doesn't depend just on the substance itself, but on the quantity. So everybody knows arsenic. Arsenic is a poison. If you consume too much of it, it kills you. But in small amounts, it actually causes a reaction from our body that could be positive. So there are some types of rare leukemia, which is a cancer of the blood, where if they're given arsenic, it helps the body react and fight the leukemia. So small amounts of arsenic, even though it's a poison, in very small amounts can be helpful to the body. The other extreme is water. I talk all the time about how wonderful water is, how it's the most important thing that we need to eat. Water is fantastic. However, if you drink too much water, you can actually make yourself sick. So there was a contest that a radio program put on where they were going to have a competition who could drink the most water. And the prize was some children's game, I can't remember, some Xbox or Nintendo or something. And there was a mother who had a young child. She didn't have a lot of money. She really wanted to win this prize for her child. So she went to compete, and she was dead set on winning this competition. And she did. She won the competition. And 2 hours later, she died. She had drunk so much water that her body had a very negative reaction, and she died. So it does happen. It's not that a substance is intrinsically harmful or harmless. It also has to do with the quantity. So sugar in small amounts isn't poison. In small amounts, sugar is in nature, in raspberries and oranges, watermelon. In those small amounts, it's actually healthy for us. Our body likes it. But in large amounts, it can be poison. Well, these food industries, these companies, they say, oh, but sugar is one of the purest foods there is. It's all natural. Sure, it came from sugar cane or beets, which is natural, but it's been extracted, cleaned, filtered, refined, and purified. Processes where chemicals are involved and heating and all kinds of stuff, so that you get this very, very pure substance, which the chemical components of it are carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. And sure, it's very, very pure, but that doesn't necessarily make it good. And then that it's all natural because it comes from something that's of the earth, that also doesn't mean anything, really. So, and we're going to look at this concept of defining words and using words to mislead us, specifically in the topic of sugar, in a lecture ahead. So sugar, in the quantities in which it's found in our current food landscape, is toxic. If you are eating pre-made food, processed food, things that come out of boxes or that are pre-frozen that you put into your microwave and heat, if you're stopping at a fast food joint or Denny's, or you're getting way too much sugar. And in that level, that sugar is toxic for our bodies. The American Heart Association, which is the first one to change their recommendation, because the FDA still hasn't changed their recommendation, and other health organizations in the United States still haven't changed their recommendations about sugar. But the American Heart Association, the first one to change it, lowered it, and now they recommend between 6 and 9 teaspoons of sugar a day. In the United States, the average person is eating 22 teaspoons of sugar a day. It's locked. Somebody's trying to get it up.
And if you're Cuban and you have Cuban coffee,
So, we're obviously eating way too much. And you can think, oh, I don't eat 22 teaspoons of sugar a day. But the thing is, it's hidden in everything. If you're eating bread, you're eating sugar. If you're having, what?
These are for taste.
Exactly. It's got a lot of great properties, and that's why they use it. Not only for taste, but it adds weight to products and substance. It caramelizes, which is great for cooking. It stabilizes things. It's good for keeping things on the shelf so that bacteria doesn't grow. So the shelf life is increased. There's many, many wonderful reasons to add sugar to your products. And they know all of these. And that's why they do it. So even though you think, well, you know, I had 1 teaspoon of sugar in my coffee and that's it, that's what you know of. Chances are you've had 12, 14, 16, 18 teaspoons of sugar. And obviously some people have 44, so they compensate for us. So hopefully all of us here are having less than 22, but how much less is hard to know. And that's why it's really important that you are in control of what you eat. If you're buying a box and you're eating out of that box, you have no control over what is in that product. If you buy a head of broccoli and you chop it up and you saute it, you have complete control over what's in that broccoli. So this is the picture that the food industry wants us to have of a teaspoon of sugar. And that is not a teaspoon of sugar. That is like 3 teaspoons of sugar. This is a teaspoon of sugar, measured and flattened out. So it's not that we're eating 22 of these. No, we're eating maybe 4 or 5 of these. And that adds up to 22 teaspoons. So don't be fooled. When you put that into your coffee, it doesn't count as 1 teaspoon. It counts as 4 or 5. The consumption of excessive sugars, and that's what we're talking about. We're not talking about sugar as a bad thing, because sugar is naturally in a lot of good products. Most fruits and vegetables have a certain amount of sugar. But it's the excessive consumption of sugar which is directly tied to obesity, to type 2 diabetes, to hypertension, heart disease, cancer, and now they're coming up that it's directly tied to even more things. They say Alzheimer's is basically a type of diabetes in the brain. And that is what's happening because our society is consuming too much sugar. Now, it's not the only culprit. It's not the only reason people get cancer. But it's certainly one of the big factors of why we are getting all of these sicknesses. Basically, we are eating ourselves sick. And our love affair with sugar is one of the main culprits. So we think, oh, what's that one little dessert? I haven't had a dessert all day. Okay, if you're eating a very, very healthy diet where you're in complete control of everything you eat and you know you haven't taken any sugar, and you're going to have that chocolate mousse, which maybe equals out to 8, 10 teaspoons of sugar, just that little chocolate mousse. Okay, fine. But if you've been eating Cheerios for breakfast and then something processed for lunch, you stop at Subway, their bread has tons of sugar, and then you think, oh, what's that one more dessert? That one more dessert is that you are eating yourself sick. You are slowly walking down that alleyway towards cancer, towards diabetes, towards a heart attack. So this lecture with sugar is going to continue, and we're going to talk about defining these terms: energy, starch, glucose, fructose, sucrose. What are all of these? And how does the food industry use it to fool us? To make us think, oh, this is healthy for me, when in reality, it's not. We're going to talk about understanding the many forms of sugar. So what's the difference between fructose and sucrose and lactose? All of these are types of sugars. But lactose is in milk, and fructose is in fruits, and sucrose is in a lot of things. So what exactly are these things? Also, we're going to talk about sugars and fat and the types of body fat, because if we eat excessive amounts of sugar, our body, just like it can turn fat into glucose, it can turn sugar into fat and store it for a rainy day. And that's what ends up happening. And there's also different types of body fat. it's not just our love handles around the waist. There's fat that accumulates around our organs, and that's actually the most dangerous type of fat. We're going to talk about sugar and nutrition because, as I explained, we need sugar for energy. We need glucose to survive. But how does eating sugar actually decrease from other nutrition that we should be getting? We're going to talk about sugar and calories, sugar in children, how we're just feeding our children sugar and getting them addicted to sugar already from a young age. There's this wonderful researcher, he's a doctor in San Francisco, who said he fights a lot because society tends to talk about sugar and personal responsibility. If I am overweight, it's my fault. I don't have enough willpower, it's my fault. That's what society has been saying. Even the government, it's been saying, well, you don't eat the right things, you don't exercise enough. But this doctor in San Francisco, he says, he's a pediatrician, he says, I work with babies who are 6 months old and they are already overweight. How can it be personal responsibility? It has to do with our food environment and what is available for us to eat and what we're choosing to eat and what we're feeding our children. We're going to talk about sugar and sickness, sugar in our diet, and sugar in balance, which ultimately is the goal of these talks. How to find balance in our love affair with sugar. So one final thought, which is just a little window into other things that we're going to be exploring in these lectures about sugar, and that is that the most consistently successful way of losing weight, if you're interested in losing weight, is giving up added sugars. So it's not Martha Stewart's diet or the Atkins diet or paleo diet. The most successful way to lose weight is cutting out added sugars. And I'll tell you why it works. Because if you cut out added sugars, that leads you to eat real food. If you go to the supermarket and you say, I'm not going to have added sugars, and you start pulling down the boxes and looking for some processed food that doesn't have added sugars, at the end of the day, you're not going to take anything home. You're forced to go to the right alleys in the supermarket and pull out vegetables and grains and beans and meat, real food. So by cutting out added sugars, you're steering yourself clear of all of these dangerous things, and you're eating the right thing. And that is guaranteed to help you lose weight. We eat excessively, not because we're hungry, but because we're addicted. If you start eating rice and beans and meat and broccoli and kale, you're going to feel satisfied. You're going to feel full. If you're eating processed foods glittered with sugar, you're always going to crave more. And so you're going to eat excessively. If you eat real food, you'll find that you don't eat excessively. So that's our lecture for today. We'll continue with the topic of sugar for maybe 2 more lectures. And thank you very much.